Alright guys, so we just had a patch note from the JP server and they have introduced 3 new characters. Now normally I don't tend to talk about those new characters till they're officially in the game, just in case their kit changes. However, this time I think I'm going to make an exception because one of the new characters to be introduced is going to be SP Ushijima V2. And if we follow the normal schedule, we should be getting SP Ushijima V1 on global next week. And I know some people will be considering whether or not they should still pull for Yujima V1 if now that V2 is going to be out as well. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick breakdown on my source on the V2 version of Ushijima and then talk about whether or not he's going to be a power creep to the V1 version or they're actually going to be doing totally different things. Okay. So starting off, I'm actually going to start off with his skill 2 first. This is a surf skill. All versions of Yujima have a surf skill. This one is no exception. The base multiplier is not that high. It's 140 at level 1 up to 180. And you're also able to increase team morale. But the nice thing here is that if you're actually able to enter team morale awakening first, then your next surf is actually going to increase by 100% multiplier. So even at level 1, this can essentially get to 240% multiplier, which is actually on par with a lot of the ultimate attacks. Okay. So this is more down to your team rotation. It kind of just tell you that you preferably want to start off Yujima at the front so that you enter team morale awakening first before he is then rotated to the surfing position. Okay. Now let's talk about his skill 1. So he's going to increase his power attack, and also you'll be further increased whenever your team morale reaches certain threshold. If it's 600 points, which to be honest is not that difficult to reach, you probably reach that around kind of the 3rd or 4th rally, depending on how many of other characters you have to kind of boost up your morale. But essentially what you're able to get is going to be a 15% increase into your power attack. Now, once they actually reach to a total of 1,200 points, which is going to be towards the end of the match, to be honest, your power attack stats will increase by another 2,000 points. This will be in-game stats, so probably if you actually do it in proportion, this is probably only going to be roughly around 20 or maybe 25% of power attack stats. So in total, from skill 1, he will be able to improve his power attack stats by roughly about 40%, although that is obviously towards the end of match. Towards the start of match, it's only going to be a mere 7 to 12%, and the middle of match is going to be around 20%, end of match is going to be around 40%, so it's kind of been tiered. But the most important thing from his skill 1 is actually the fact that when he's not in Team Morale Awakening, your ultimate attack, which is this attack, high power left, will not enter cooldown. So this you can already tell, this is once again a gimmick that all versions of Ushijima have, which is the fact that they are able to spam ultimate attack. However, this time around for V2, there is going to be a bit of a condition. You cannot be in Team Morale Awakening in order for him to be able to spam it. Okay? Now let's move on to his skill 3. When not in Team Morale Awakening, his power will be further increased, his power attack stats will be further increased. However, when he's actually inside Team Morale Awakening, it will actually be decreased. And this in conjunction with the fact that from his skill 1, we can already tell that you will be able to spam when he's not inside Team Awakening, but not when you're actually inside. This kind of already tell you the playstyle for this version of Ushijima, right? He's trying to do as much spike as possible outside of Team Awakening. However, inside Team Awakening, he will be leaving the spiking opportunity to your teammates instead. Now, then the last part also says for every 10 points your team morale gained, you'll be able to get 1 stack with this assist buff. It will be buffing up your skill multiplier up to 120 stacks, which basically means you can go as high as 240% increase into his spike multiplier. Very, very high number, but once again, in order to reach 120 stacks, we are talking about towards the end of the match, okay? But just remember, this can give an insane buff of a 240% skill multiplier. Now, moving on to his ultimate attack, pretty straightforward. The base power, 260, that's actually slightly lower than some of the other spikers in SP levels, but remember, once again, you can get a huge buff from his skill 3. So if I actually take the maximum number here, so 240 from here, and let's say level 5, 320, he can actually get into an ultimate spike of 560%. And remember, he can actually spam that outside the Team Morale Awakening as well, which is actually pretty insane. Now, the last sentence in his ultimate says that when not in Team Morale Awakening, it's also guaranteed to be critical, okay? So now we literally got 3 evidence suggesting his playstyle. When he's not in Team Morale Awakening, not only he's able to spam, all of his spikes are going to be guaranteed to be critical, and he will be getting extra buff, okay? So this clearly tells you his preferred playstyle, just spamming really, really strong spikes, but only when outside Team Morale Awakening. Now moving on to his skill resonance. Skill resonance 2 When you enter Team Awakening, you are going to get increased to attack technique buff. Now, it's not very clear here whether it's going to last for the whole match or just for that rally, or whether it will disappear when Team Awakening finished. Also not clear whether or not this can be stacked. So for example, if you enter the second time round, will this then become 40%? Not too sure, but the fact is that attack technique buff is always nice, especially considering the fact that he doesn't have that in any of his base kit. So this is always nice, but just probably some testing need to be done to see exactly how this has been activated. And then the second half, it says that when you exit Team Awakening, the cooldown of your serve and also ultimate attack will be reset. Now, this is actually pretty important in my opinion, depending on your team composition. Now, the reason why this is very important is that normally when you're in Team Awakening, you will be lasting for at least 8 touches. And normally every single spike takes up about 4 touches, right? So you have like a block, a receive, a set, and then a spike. So those are normally 4 actions leading up to a spike. So if your Team Awakening is going to last for 8 touches, what that normally means is that you'll be performing at least 2 spikes inside Team Awakening. And unless you have a character who's also capable of spamming attacks inside Team Awakening, what that tends to suggest is that alongside with Ushijima, you need to prepare yourself 2 other spikers for the times when you're inside Team Awakening. Now, there are actually going to be other ways of forcing you to exit Team Awakening, which is going to become in the form of SP shareable. However, I'm not going to talk about that today because the focus is on Ushijima. So if we actually talk about Ushijima in silos, what's going to happen is that without skill readiness 2, you actually need to bring 2 other spikers to cover for the Team Awakening phases. However, if you do actually have this available, what's going to happen is that you'll need to bring 1 other spiker because you can also now spike with Ushijima, and because the cooldown will just reset immediately after Team Awakening, Ushijima can spike at least once inside Team Awakening without any impact on his cooldown out after the awakening is finished. Okay, so that's kind of why this is actually quite important if you are looking at Ushijima in silos. If you have other characters who can force you to exit Team Awakening, like I said, for example, SP shareable, this is not that needed. However, in silos, skill readiness 2 is actually going to be a quite important upgrade for SP Ushijima V2. Then skill readiness 4, when you're not inside Team Awakening, at the start of each rally, you're also going to further increase the power attack stats. It's a nice buff, it's 40%, and also you're also able to remove 1 random debuff, which is also quite nice as well. But the most important thing is actually that when you're not inside Team Awakening, you're now also able to increase your strength. And this can go up as high as 180%, which is absolutely bonkers. That's like one of the highest buff you can get in this game. I don't actually think, off the top of my head, I cannot think of any other character who is able to buff up a single stat by as high as 880%, okay? So this is a crazy amount of buff. And this is also very, very important for Yujima, because if we actually take a look at his base kit, he's already able to increase loads of power attack from his skill 1 and also skill 3. And then his skill 3 can also increase his skill multiplier. Now you also have attack technique from skill readiness 2. So literally the only part of the damage formula which is currently not covered is going to be strength. So that's kind of what, with the addition of skill readiness 4, he is now actually able to cover every single aspect of the damage formula, and that is going to make his spike super, super strong. Now this brings us to the most important question of them all. Should you still summon for V1 of Ushijima now that we know the V2 versions coming in the future? To me, the two are performing slightly different roles and also have different impact in terms of team composition. With V1 version of Yujima, provided you get him to skill readiness 2, you can guarantee him to cover for all of your spikes, and what that basically means is that you do not need to bring any spikers at all into your team. Whereas for the V2 version of Ushijima, you kind of need to bring 1 other spiker just to prepare yourself for Team Awakening, or otherwise the alternative is to bring a dedicated support such as SP shareable, who's able to force you to exit Team Awakening. But in other cases, it kind of is a different type of team composition as you would expect with the V1 version of Yujima. So before deciding on whether or not to summon for the V1 version of Yujima, what you need to ask yourself is that in your ideal team comp, is he going to be the only spiker on your team, or are you going to plan to bring 1 other spiker onto your team as well? If the answer is the former, yes, Ushijima will be the only spiker you want on your team, then yes, V1 is still going to be irreplaceable in that context. However, if the ideal team in your head currently feature 1 other spiker, then yes, I will probably say the V2 version of Ushijima is likely going to be a slight upgrade to the V1 version. Okay, so hopefully that clears things up, and let me know what you guys think about the V2 version of Yujima, and would you still summon for the V1